right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is a meeting of the Board of Education for the Appleton Area School District. My name is Kay Eggert, and I'm serving as the board president. And first, roll call of fellow board members. Peng Tao.
Here.
Nick Ross.
Here.
Jason Kolpak.
Here.
Christine Sauter.
Here.
Edward Ruffalo.
Here.
James Bacon.
Here.
Okay. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just as a reminder, anyone that may be joining us remotely, materials for tonight's meeting can be found on board docs, which can be linked to through the district website. So I'm now going to ask if board members have any requests to remove any of the consent agenda items for separate consideration tonight. Okay, see none, then I'll ask for approval of tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, any questions? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We will move then into, we have a couple special presentations. The first would be a drawing of the lots for the ballot order for the April 2nd, 2024 AASD School Board Member Spring Election. So Kayla has there are two individuals running for the board, Edward Ruffalo, and I am again running. And we do have a basket with the two names in the basket. Lauren, who is our school board representative from Appleton North, if you would do us the honors of drawing those names, please, and we'll say who's first and who's second on the ballot.
First is Edward Ruffalo. And then the second, Kay Eggert.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, the next, actually, we're ready for your report.
So I split my categories up into 5. I did the school overall. So in November, we did giving grams for Thanksgiving, and they were just these kind of like telegrams where students and teachers would send them to students for 50 cents. These bags included just like a special note, and then also just like little candies that you could include, and then just small like erasers, small little gifts for everybody. And we sold, I think, 270 around throughout 2 weeks, and it was a really good just like pick me up for all of the students and teachers. And then for Christmas, we had the custodians decorate our school with Christmas trees and Santa statues, and our custodian Rodney dressed up as Santa, visiting classrooms and handing out candy throughout December. Right now, currently, we are preparing for second semester. It's coming by really fast, and finals week is coming next week. And also, we're hosting the winter dance for all of the grades on January 27th. So that's also coming up, which is a big school event. Second category is going to be the sports. We started a North Forecast, which is a broadcast for the school sports news. Our boys basketball team is 10-1. Our girls basketball team is 7-6. Boys swimming is 2-1, and wrestling is 2-3. And then a special shout out is to Jake Stoffel, our state champion last year. He was nominated for Athlete of the Week by Post Crescent this week. And then for clubs and activities, we had a ton of donation drives for the holidays. DECA did cans, and then NHS did a community event for all of the family members in Appleton North, and they just hosted like games for all the kids and stuff like that. Key Club did Toys for Tots and Student Council did Teacher Appreciation Cups. They were just custom lightning cups that just for a nice pick-me-up for the two staff. And then we also did Adopt a Family, and then Hope Club volunteered at the soup kitchen over break a few times. So that was a really cool opportunity for everybody. For our arts department, they did a beautiful performance for Winter Song. All three of our departments always do a great job with the orchestra and the choir and the band. They always come together and it's really cool. They're putting together our musical Anastasia right now, and they're casting at the moment. And our art classes are preparing for their art show in April with just amazing works. They're just spread out around the school right now and they look so good. And then the last category was our senior kind of stuff. So college admissions are rolling in, and since it's like the slower months for the seniors, we're brainstorming ideas for funding like our senior prank, our senior sunset, and our senior skip day in May. And we wanted to do fundraisers like Soka Senior, where anyone can pour a bucket on volunteering seniors or staff, $3 for a regular bucket, and then $5 for an ice bucket, which I think would be really cool. And then the second fundraising would be Senior Assassin. It's kind of like a similar concept, and everybody buys like a small water gun, and it would be ranging from $1 to $5 to $10, and this would count as like the buy-in fee for everybody. And then everyone's assigned a target, and then the last one standing receives 1/4 of the money pot, and then the rest goes towards funding our senior prank and our senior sunset. So I think those are really cool, and I love planning them with my senior class.
I think that's going to take senior praying to a new level if you actually have funding for it. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that. I'm not sure the superintendent wants to hear this plan. Oh, that's a great report. Thank you. Any other any other comments?
Yeah, just, I think you could get more for the ice bucket.
Yeah, especially if we did staff. I'm crossing my fingers that they volunteer.
Well, ice baths are supposed to be so therapeutic now, so it could be a win-win for folks, so. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, then our next special presentation would be our 2022-23 annual financial report, the audit presentation. Holly.
Our auditor to be here. Okay, closer to me. Our principal auditor, Leah Lasecki, generally comes and presents the audit to the board. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, she is not able to be with us tonight. So I am going to do my best to explain this to you. And I'm just high level, point out some highlights in the documents that you received. And if there are any questions that I can't answer, if Greg can't answer, or just something that you want to speak directly to her about, we will be more than happy to put you in touch with her. I am going to start the discussion tonight then with the executive summary and board communications. That would be this document if you have it in front of you. And no worries, I'm not going to read every single page, but starting on the top of page 1. One of the most important things that they always go through is just very simply, you know, why we do the audit every year and what are we to get out of it. So the most important thing that comes out for our external reviewers is the opinion. And our opinions here, this is just kind of the generic version. I'll read the actual version later, but the financial statements are fairly stated. And this is reading for the auditor then. We issued what is known as a clean audit report or a unmodified, you know, the board I talked to you previously about an unmodified report. This is the best one we can get. The second statement then on that page is regarding internal controls. And there they do list the finding, and the specifics of the finding is the very last page of the financial statements, but we'll, you know, you don't have to go there necessarily. The finding is regarding the preparation of the annual financial report. So this, the actual report itself. The reason we get the finding is because we, AASD, do not prepare this report. We are responsible for it, but we hire the auditors to do this for us. And we will continue to get this finding for that reason. It is not worth the time or the resources to create this document. And we are probably one of 400 in the state that get this finding for this reason, because we hire our auditors to prepare this document. The middle section of that page 1 then is the identification of the federal and state major programs that were included in these, what we call the single audit for the year. So just so that you have a list of those. And then there is a statement about the increase to the fund balance. And we're going to talk a little bit about the fund balance tonight as we go through these reports. The balance at June 30th, 23 was about 29% of our expenditures, ending at about 62,500,000. So that is an increase over the previous year of just over 2,900,000. And again, we'll get into some detail about that later, but that is due largely in part to transferring to self-funded health insurance as we had to reserve those funds. So that increased our fund balance. And then lastly on that page is just a brief comparison of the final revenues and compared to the budget. Continuing in that document, then page 2 through 6 are what they call the formal required communications. So this is information that the auditors are required to give you, the board, and it becomes part of the two documents together, become part of what we call the audited financials. So those required communications then start with what is all included in the audit, brief description of that, and timing of the reports, things like that. Statement number 2 then goes on to make the statement that there were no new accounting policies adopted for this audit year or for these financial statements, and that the application of the existing policies was not changed during 2023. The district did evaluate a new policy, Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement number 96, which relates to subscription-based information technology arrangements. And they just noted on here that there were no material impacts on the district's financial statements, and I am going to go into this one a little bit shortly as it does come up again. The next statement in this document is regarding accounting estimates that are used in preparing the financial statements. So we need to include estimates for things like asset depreciation, post-employment benefits, pension liabilities, insurance reserves, things like that. So the next discussion is about how those are, why those are included and what they are. There's then a statement about financial statement disclosures. So what needs to be included? There are no particularly sensitive financial statement disclosures, and that the disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. So again, this is auditor language that just basically says we're including what we're supposed to include, and it's as accurate as they can tell. The next statement is there were no difficulties encountered in performing the audit and no disagreements with management. So again, just an auditor statement saying it's a lot of work, but it went well. And then the last piece, it's on page 4 actually, includes a statement that's titled uncorrected misstatement. And this is regarding to that GASB standard number 96 that I just mentioned. So it's the subscription-based information technology arrangements. So these are basically our subscriptions for software. And the new standard is similar to the one we adopted last year for leases. So GASB is trying to make governmental statements more similar to the private sector, so that when finance institutions and things are reviewing, you know, two statements side by side and they have us up against a corporation, they want them to be a little bit more similar. So we are now required to record leases, long-term leases, and now this year is long-term subscriptions. So after reviewing all of the software subscriptions for the district, there was only one that qualified under the new standard. And after discussing with the auditors, we opted not to change the financial statements for that one subscription because it was not material. Just be aware that that may change in the future if new ones are added or and the amount becomes material. The last parts of this document then, page 7 and 8, is a summary of the ending fund balances for the years 23 and 22. So just kind of a comparison. And this is for all the funds, not just the general funds. We tend to focus on the top one there that says general fund, which is fine, but this does include debt service and special revenues, capital projects, etc. And then the last several pages of this report are management's representation letters. So every year, we, the district, have to issue a statement. It's a template that the auditors give us, but basically saying, you know, that we agreed to give them access to our books, and we agreed to work with them. That there's no pending you know, they ask us a myriad of questions. There's no pending litigation. They also ask us about, like I said before, the estimates that are used, the assumptions that we use, and things like that. So this letter kind of just puts that in a nutshell, basically that we cooperated with the audit and included the estimates and the assumptions that were necessary. I think I'll just keep going if that's okay, and then we'll field some questions at the end. So moving on to the financial statements themselves, then the larger document. And again, I hate to disappoint anybody, but I am not going to go through all 89 pages. We will just give a few highlights and then field a couple of questions. So page 1 through 3, again, is the auditor's report. And the statement starting in the second paragraph is the one that's always very important to our creditors and anyone reading the financial statement. It states, and again, this is the auditors, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the district as of June 30th, 2023. That is the official statement. So when Leah put in her summary that it's a clean audit, it's the same thing. That's just the official statement that's required under GASB. Starting kind of on page 5 then, is, again, a statement that the district puts out. And this is, our information and summaries. This is a discussion and analysis of the rest of the financial statements. And on page 5 and also again on page 11 is included some summary to significant items that affected the financials this past year. So additional interest income earned last year, compensation increases, the change in employee health insurance as of January 1, 2023, the continued use of ESSER funds, new debt that the district issued for construction starting after the successful referendum in 2022. Just a few highlights. So those were some of the larger impacts. Basic financial statements then start on page 14 with the statement of net position. This includes everything in the district, all funds combined. And also includes some information that's required under the GASB statements, but is not necessarily part of the balance sheet and income statements that we're used to seeing. So again, some of those pension liabilities and things like that. Page 16 then is starts the more detailed financial statements of the balance sheet. And then the statement of revenues and expenditures is on page 19. These statements then are split out by grouped funds. So general funds and then referendum debt service funds, capital project funds, and then the others. Page 19, again, is our statement of revenues and expenditures. We tend to spend a lot of time during the year talking about, when we talk about our budget, this is usually what we're talking about. You know, we do include some assets, liabilities, and things like that as well. But generally, when we're talking about our budgeted numbers, we're talking about our revenues and our expenditures for the year. So the first column there that is our general fund. And again, that's obviously the largest fund that we run. And towards the bottom of there is the net change in fund balance. So that $2,955,000 increase that we had talked a little bit about. And then at the end of the year, the fund balance of $62,500,000. There's several pages of detailed statements there. And then pages 24 through 56 are the notes to the financial statements. These notes detail every assumption, every estimate, policies that are applied in preparing the financials. So they kind of go through very specifically for each of the assets and liabilities, revenues, expenses, and list all of that out in pretty good detail. Just kind of wanted to highlight one of them since we spend so much time talking about fund balance. Page 53. So we had talked at the end of the year last year about the fact that our fund balance that's unassigned actually went down. And here's the reason why. So you just saw me say we had 62.5 at June 30th. Assigned fund balance, however, you see there's 40 million that is already earmarked for specific expenses, and it is not available for general use. So those are some of the just highlights that I had. What other questions do you guys have?
What would be the COVID-related expenses under the?
ESSER, the ESSER grant. Yeah, it was just the title that the auditors were using at the time. Yep.
I have several questions, more for understanding than anything else. I look on page 10, under expenses, I see our non-program expenses. Last year were 761 and they jumped to 15 million. And if I look on page, oops, I just had it right. 19, there's a breakdown of that, 15 million. General tuition, special education adjustments, refunds, voucher payments. So give me some insight on why that jumped so much. It's classification or
It's,
did
yeah,
we really go up that much?
so if you're still on page 10 at
Page 10 and the details are on page 19.
19,
19.
90.
What makes up that 15, 16? One nine, there's non-program.
19. So I believe it is just a transfer. So if we look at the non-program
Mhm.
and then the interest on debt, those two alone kind of swap. And it's a timing thing. So what is due within 1 year versus what is due long term. So because if you remember, we had some of our debt that was ready to be paid off. But we chose not to pay that off and then we incurred additional debt. So I believe that's just a classification between those two.
Okay. So you think it's a move between interest on debt and non-program, just as when we paid it, now we're paying it.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
'Cause other than the new debt itself, there is nothing in the budget that was that large of a swing.
Okay. And then my next question is related, I suppose it's more philosophic. If we look at page 55. Throughout this, the auditors and you did a nice job kind of talking about the general fund. And right in the middle, we talk about the health plan and the claims from prior years. And I just wonder, okay, I guess I have a couple of questions. So our stop loss insurance goes into effect for any member in any year if their claims go over 100,000.
300,000.
3 years, okay.
No, 300,000.
300,000. Ooh, they said 100,000. Look at that.
Where? I'm sorry.
I thought I saw 100,000. I'll look at that again.
Okay, if so, that's a typo.
But there's also a clause that if our overall expenditures for healthcare is more than 125% of the premiums that we collect, the stop loss kicks in. So does the fund balance that we're holding, that 6 million, would that cover that 25% overrun if a year, if that should happen?
Yes, and that's part of, so we're allowed to accumulate two different funds. So one is called IBNR, incurred but not reported. So you go to the doctor, you incur the bill, but until they actually submit it to the insurance company, doesn't hit the books. So the actuaries actually for the insurance company do their best to guess that number based on timing and, previous experience. So that's one of the amounts that we're allowed to accumulate. The second is what you're saying is kind of a reserve balance, if it were. So that in a year where we exceed 100%, so we would still have a gap in theory between that 100% and the 125 where the stop loss would kick in, that we would have to cover those expenses out of our money.
And you're comfortable, and I assume our healthcare consultants are comfortable that 6 million that we're carrying is adequate to cover that, if that should happen.
Well, we kind of have to be, because that's the cap.
Okay,
There's of course, just like everything, there's a formula and there's a cap for that, so that somebody couldn't over reserve
Mhm.
and, takes taxpayers' money and say, oh, we're gonna save this in an excessive amount.
which actually is a nice segue to my next question. If we have a year where, for our wellness programs and perhaps a bit of good luck, our premiums greatly exceed our payouts, our claims, what can we do with that surplus?
So again, the reserve, you're only allowed to keep the reserve. We basically at that point would have to adjust our rates. So, as we discussed last year when we started talking about self-funding, we basically pay ourselves. So instead of we take the money out of the employees' checks and then the district matches it, but instead of sending that money off to the insurance company, we put it in a savings account. We would just just like if you were reducing an insurance rate, we would do the same thing.
So our insurance premiums might go down for a year, but then if our losses were to catch up, we might raise it up again.
Yep,
We
and
could see
that's
some
why they.
variability in we may smooth that out a little bit. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense. to me.
and that's why that reserve is allowed, so that you don't see fluctuations like that
Mhm.
year to year to year. So that would, what you're talking, if we actually were going to make adjustment, that would be more of a trend. So if we trend for several years, level that we're meeting our marks, then that's how it is. But it happens more in the fall when we look at it and go, like this year, we looked at it and we said, we're trending that we're still pretty high utilizers. And so we are still going to estimate a 10% increase for next year to cover additional expenses as well as usage, and all of that. A bit of luck, maybe some change in programming in the future, who knows? Let's say we came in level, then we could easily say, okay, no rate increase for the year.
But really, it's a shared win between the district and their employees. So there's incentives on all sides to be
It is,
good healthcare consumers,
Yeah.
which is a positive, I think, of self-insurance.
yes.
And I just wonder, Holly, from a statement presentation standpoint, I worry a little bit that because the 6 million is rolled in there, people see that big fund balance and think, you should be spending more. After all, we're not trying to save, we're not trying to accumulate profit here. Is it permissible or in your mind beneficial to split that out from the general fund? So it's shown as a separate line item on our financials. So it's very clear that, yeah, there's $6 million here, but that's not $6 million we can spend on whatever new program or initiative or raises or anything else that people might be interested in.
So that's where they do go into like these, like in the notes, like it's a little buried. There is nothing preventing us as the district when we do it internally. If I do a presentation for you and you want to see those categories of fund balance broken out, there is nothing preventing us from doing that. Just the official statements like this have to be reported in. So unfortunately, it is a little bit buried, like you say. But yeah, we will continue the discussions about that, because from 62.5 million down to 40 million of that is already earmarked. So yeah, it's significant.
Although it does seem like our auditors are comfortable or sit with our fund balance today.
Yes.
That it's adequate. One last question, and I'll let others join in. On page 58, when we looked at our actual to budget, there are 2 line items, operation and maintenance of plant and central services that were, of course, overruns. And I'm wondering, can you give us some understanding of what happened there? Is that a one-time occurrence, or do we need to have more budget, or what the situation there is?
So the operation and maintenance, since that statement is for the entire, all funds of the district, including construction funds, that's what that was. So when we approved the referendum last year, we did not restate our budget. Knowing that we were gonna borrow money, issue bonds and start some construction in the spring, but we did not restate our budget. We could have. And then sometimes if you know your amounts, it's sometimes wise to restate I would come to the board and say, we need to do an official restatement of our budget. It gets filed with DPI. It goes on record and all of that. I didn't suggest that in this case because I didn't know if we were gonna be 2 million in, 5 million in, 10 million in with this construction. We can take our best guess, but
Certainly because it's construction related and that's being supported by the referendum,
yep,
there's no cause for concern.
correct. It was
Thank-
just those particular line items. We didn't change the budget.
Thank you very much.
And did you have one other one, Ed?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I answered all parts of that question.
For reference, the $100,000 number that he was referencing is on page 54. In the section labeled self-funded insurance programs, the second paragraph states $100,000 per individual or 125% of the annual estimated claims.
I don't have that on the same page.
Oh, it's detailed notes on all funds, note 3. Under risk management. It's the page right before the self-funded stuff.
Mhm. Oh, that is a typo. Ours is 300.
Were you planning on talking more about the finding, or is now a good time to ask about that?
You may ask about it now.
So it sounds like from the way you're describing that this is a finding multiple times. This is not a new finding just
Every
for this
year.
year, right? Okay.
Yep.
And the finding is that, just to clarify my understanding of what you described, was that we should be creating the financial disclosures on our own rather than relying on the auditor to do it, even though that's a service that they provide.
Yeah, it is per state statute. It is our responsibility to create this.
Okay.
Most districts do not because of the expertise and the time and the resources that it takes to create this thing. It is not worth it.
Sure. On a cost benefit basis, just
Mhm.
not worth it.
Yep.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, I have just a question about the subscription information. So basically, this is kind of a newer practice. Is it based on like the total dollar amount of the prescription or subscription, I should say?
It is. So basically what we have to do is, we have to look at the subscription and say, is it a 3-year, is it a 5-year? What is the total value over those 3 or 5 years? We have to report it in year 1 as, basically like a lease, money we owe. In this particular case, like I said, we only had one, the whole value was about $500,000. And discussing it with the auditor, again, cost benefit, we didn't feel it was worth the time and effort to report that one subscription for $500,000 over 5 years.
And we're
But
talking
because of
about,
that, we do have to note it.
right, and we're talking about subscriptions like to the programs used in the district,
Yeah, so I'll give
last
you,
link or something like that.
yes, Infinite Campus, Skyward, ClassLink, some of the server ones that IT uses are some heavy users. A lot of the security ones that IT uses are, significant. Fortunately, one of the rules in the GASB is that if you have the right to opt out any year, you don't have to count it. It's technically only a year to year then, and we don't have to count it. So like I said, almost all of them, all but one qualified under that clause, is that we technically have a right to cancel them at any year.
Okay, thank you, Holly. A lot of good information there, so thank you. We are going to move on with the agenda. At this time, it would be an opportunity for public input. If anyone is here at the meeting that would like to address the board, now would be a time to do that. I don't see any public input, so we will move on. We will go to number 6, information for board decision preparation. And first, business services update. Holly.
That's right. I didn't realize I was going to be next again. Business services just has one item for your consideration tonight, which is the accounts payable check register for December. The details were included in your item for consideration. And this item has been moved to the superintendent's, or move out of the superintendent's consent agenda to board business for your consideration. Questions?
Thank you. Then school and student services update. Dr. Harrison, are you with us?
Yeah, welcome everyone. School services, student services has one item for your consideration this evening. This is the WIDA ELD standards that were previously presented to you during the December 11th board meeting. And this is item 8A of the superintendent's consent agenda, and we recommend approval of this item. Any questions?
I do not see any in the room, so thank you. Then we'll move to personnel services update. Julie King.
Okay, good evening. Personnel Services does have 4 items for the board's consideration this evening. Those include 8 new educator hires. May seem a little bit high, but many of the positions that we had that were previously filled with substitutes or upcoming semester retirements or resignations, we had opportunity to hire some recent grads and other qualified candidates. So it's a little bit higher than it's been in the past. We also have 4 educator resignations, and then we do have approval of 11 job descriptions. So as stated in the item, according to Wisconsin Administrative Code and District Policy 254, any professional employee classification positions requiring DPI licensure shall be adopted by the board. So essentially that's our educator and our administrator positions. So detailing the job descriptions are important to outlining the operational functions of the district. The process for job descriptions would be once approved, they would be posted on our, excuse me, my lights went out, our internal website for staff to be able to see. Are there questions on any of the 11 job descriptions?
Hi, Julie. Not a question.
Okay.
Very minor copy edit. I just noticed that, for example, in the first job description, there's not verb, like the first bullet point is assure, the second is supervises. So little verb agreement there. And then some of them have the bullet points ending in a period and some don't. So that's all.
Thank- That is an ongoing controversy in our department about the
Okay.
period. Thank you. We will ensure those grammatical edits would be revised.
So just to follow on that, if some of those changes are made, I would consider that they would be non-substantive. They would not have to come back for approval again from the board.
I would appreciate that.
Okay, great. All right. As long as everyone's good. Any other questions about that?
Yeah, Julie, I just wanted to clarify, these are all updates to existing job descriptions. There's nothing new in here. Is that accurate?
Some of them are new. So as an example, the STEM position is a new position to the district. So that was completely new. The admin positions, a lot of the executive positions, those were part of the restructure and an adjustment. So those weren't new positions, but the STEM would be the newest position. Some of the revisions on, for example, the special education, we did have to add in and update some of our physical requirements as we have a new pre-employment protocol service. So that's part of the process as well. And as we see those, we bring those forward for revision.
Thank you.
And just for context, Julie, it was not that many years ago that this process was started, that you were really looking at all of the job descriptions in revising, making sure things were up to date. Is
I
that?
believe 2018-19 school year was
Okay, well, more years than what I guess I recalled, but I mean, it's a big undertaking. And so
it is.
you bring a batch at a time, or as you see.
Yeah, that was the preference of the board, was once a year or as needed to bring them forward. So we tried to batch them together versus bringing one here and one there.
Thank you.
Right, you're welcome.
Anything else on that? Okay.
Oh, I did have one other item. So the last item, I apologize, is the internship. So this has been a great source for skilled candidates. I would just note that typically we have about 5 WIP internships. We're seeing a little bit of a decline in that just because some of our universities are doing more on the job student teaching. So the WIP internship is becoming a little less popular as it had been. That would be all if there's any other questions.
Go ahead, Chris.
Julie, would you please review the responsibilities of an intern then that would be hired by the district?
Sure. So a WIP intern is very similar to a student teacher. The difference would be a WIP intern can teach a class up to 50% of the day. They still have a cooperating teacher. They would have additional professional development, and their whole placement, so their whole 18 weeks would be in one assignment. So sometimes it's 9 weeks at one grade level, 9 weeks at another. It would be a continuum of 18 weeks at that same assignment.
Thank you for the clarification.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
And then we'll move to the board's consent agenda, which consists of 2 sets of meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the board's consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, then roll call, please. Kayla?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, then the superintendent's consent agenda. Mr. Hodges.
The superintendent's consent agenda includes 5 items for your consideration. The first item was reported on by Dr. Steve Harrison during the school services update. And then items 8B through E were reported on by Julie King during her personnel services update. And I recommend approval of these items 8A through E.
I'll move approval of the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
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 Ed Ruppel,
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then we will move down to board business. And the first item listed is the WASB resolutions. So annually at the Wisconsin Association of School Boards goes through a process to come up with resolutions that they'll put before the entire representatives of all the school districts within the WASB. And these resolutions will be discussed and voted on at the convention. And then the approved resolutions help the working towards trying to get new legislation passed and working with our legislators. So we have hard copies of the proposed resolutions that will be taken up this year at the convention. And Nick is our representative who will be at the convention. And so we'll go through these, go through the resolutions and then help provide some guidance to Nick on how this board would like Nick to vote on our behalf at the convention. So
I do want to add that members of the executive team are here with us and they will give a brief summary of each of the resolutions. And then obviously they'll do their best to answer any questions that you would have, but ultimately it is up to the board to decide to support or to not support the resolutions.
okay, so who wants to take the lead? Let's take our chance.
All right, so I have the first resolution, which is student teacher and WIP interns. I just spoke about this briefly as this is a program that we have participated in as a district. So we would support this resolution as WIP internships have been successful in sourcing qualified candidates and supporting them. Obviously, we don't have a lot as far as the fees, that's the higher ed. But as far as supporting the programs, absolutely.
Good evening. I have the second resolution, which states for the stipends for cooperating teachers. We support the creation of a stipend program to incentivize and compensate our DPI designated cooperating teachers for consistency and accessibility and to boost talent development across our states. It goes without saying that we have top tier teachers who are mentoring our student teachers. It's an excellent way for talent development. We understand currently the workload that is placed on our teachers to teach our children, as well as to be that mentor or support our cooperating teachers. We know that with this extra care, it could help us fill needed positions in the future. So we support this resolution as well.
So as we go through this, do you have, Nick, anytime you have any, follow-up questions or anyone does, just to bring those up? So if you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I guess I was looking to hear the staff recommendation and then I will ask questions as they arise. But y'all are doing great so far.
So we can pause it between each resolution just to give you a chance to ask questions at that time. And then at the end, obviously, as well. So are there any questions about either of the first two resolutions that were presented?
I mean, the only thing that comes to my mind, I don't know what the funding for these potential resolutions would be. So basically, it looks like WASB supports creating, these are new resolutions. Sometimes these resolutions have appeared year after year. But these are new ones, it appears to me, the way, just the information that I've read. Doesn't say where the funding would come from, but anyways, start with.
It does not say. It does say that the state.
I must have missed that sentence. Is that in there? Okay.
State currently does not pay cooperating teachers.
I mean, I assumed from the language of the resolution, but it's not clear, but I just assumed whether I was right or wrong, that the DPI would, the state would be funding the stipend program. But it isn't clear.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, but, right. So the idea is good. And the funding would have to see where the funding would come from.
And then just a point of clarification, after the staff, the administration team goes through their recommendations, we as a group will go through each one and decide, or are we like how are we doing this part?
I think we should do it as we go, because that way, if we have additional questions, I think then the team is still here that we could ask questions. So.
So
board-
in that case, can we go back to the first resolution?
Yes, yes.
And I mean,
Would it be quicker just to express any disagreement with the particular, like if anyone has any disagreement, we could state it. Otherwise, we can assume that everyone agrees.
Yes, or any questions, if it's something you don't understand or, yeah, I would agree.
So just with the WIP intern, so the board understands that is district funded at this time. A WIP intern currently, the requirement is $5,000 commitment, which is $4,500 paid to the intern and $500 paid for additional PD that's provided to those interns.
so I guess if it's all right with the group, as we go through each one, I'll just check in and see if there are any, like if anyone would want to talk further about it or it doesn't support the resolution and we can work through that. But like for this one, for example, I agree with the administration team and it sounds like everybody else does too.
Just for clarification. For clarification, it says across the state, which may include year-round licensure. Could you explain what that might be? Julie,
What I anticipate that is currently a WIP intern would be, licensed for a semester. So we have a challenge sometimes when somebody's a WIP intern or previous. Maybe they want to sub prior to if they're going to classes, things of that nature. So it's just allowing a little bit more of a seamless path with full year licensure.
thank you.
So in that case, I'll be voting to support on our.
Okay, so the next few are me. The next resolution 24-03 is truly an update to some language to reflect some current terminology and then align with federal law. So you can see there, they added underlined language and deleted those that were crossed out. So federal funding instead of federal aid, and then added in to ensure compliance with federal law. With that, we would agree and recommend that. The next resolution.
Let's hold on. Let's let them discuss this one first.
And just backing up real
Yeah.
quick.
We got ahead of ourselves a little bit, but we're gonna,
It's all good.
it's all good.
Any question or disagreement on the?
I think to Kay's point earlier, I would want to know where the money. I think they might debate that at assembly, because there was some of that happening last year when I went, so.
Only some. I mean, yeah, I agree with the general philosophy of the resolution, so I would say I support it.
Maybe the funding, maybe that will be a point of discussion on the floor. I don't know. I mean, hopefully, so, again, these are position statements that then can be used to lobby the legislature, or in this case, it was DPI. Compensate Wisconsin DPI designating cooperating teachers. So, yeah, I don't know where
The
the
funding would be part of the legislative process.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, we're not just saying here that we need to pass a law. It's just,
Right.
this is the position of WASB, and they think it's a good idea and they want to lobby the government to do that thing. That's all we're saying.
Correct.
I'm just naming that will be a point, probably a point for discussion, the same way we're discussing. That there's gonna be that kind of a debate.
Mr. Hernandez.
Just to go along this, if and when public schools are fully funded the way that they should be, this, if in fact you do vote for it, we can point at this and saying, if we're fully funded, these are things that we could do. If we don't ever put anything here, then we'll be maintained to be partially funded because we haven't stated we need these things.
Good point.
Now, number 3. Thank you, Amy. This is small, and I know like a lot of these upcoming ones are. Any questions or? I'm trying to think of the most polite way to say disagreement. Okay. Oh, I like the thumbs up. Yeah, I like. Okay, thank you for your patience, Amy.
Yeah,
Number
no
4.
problem. So number 4, there are really 2 amendments that are embedded into this one. Both of them stem around the language of mainstreaming and how that is an outdated term, and look to align with more of that goal of inclusive practices. And again, align with our IDEA. So you'll notice there that language has been crossed out and new language involving best practice around inclusion for students with disabilities, and that access to the general education environment has been added in. That is something that we would support.
Seeing any thumbs down? Okay.
Perfect. So number 5 focuses on our state specialty schools. And so we do have a state funded specialty school for students, again, blind and visually impaired and or deaf and hard of hearing. The change here is really, again, within that language, it aligns with our Wisconsin DPI criteria and impairment area. Again, the other emphasis that was added here was that placements within a specialty school for the state of Wisconsin would be determined by an IEP team, both of which we would recommend. Okay. Perfect. And then number 6 is on seclusion and restraint. Unlike the others, this one is not an amendment. This is a creation one. And so here, WASB looks to create some language around best practices, resources, training, and funding to support school districts within seclusion and restraint practices. Again, focusing on improving our systems and reducing those harmful events. This is another one that we would recommend supporting.
I don't see the same number of thumbs up I did before.
I was reading.
Sorry.
It's okay as far as it goes, but. A lot of specific.
So we will support it.
All right, 24/7 as regards to the Office of School Safety. The Office of School Safety was only funded for a period of time, and their funding was, it was not funded in the current budget cycle, but it did get a 1-year extension, which gets us through the year we're currently in. We would support refunding the Office of School Safety. They provide great resources for crisis planning, safety assessments. And one tool that we do use regularly is our Speak Up, Speak Out software that provides 24-hour coverage for anonymous reporting for our students. So that is a part that we use every day. The last 2 school years, we've had approximately 830 reports come through that system. So we would really like to retain the use of that.
So that funding was federal funding. And so now the federal funding is, well, it was a 1-year continuation.
We're currently in that 1-year extension right now. yes.
Extension, okay, but, so this is really, this would have to look for new funding because the federal funding is not there.
Correct. All that federal grant money that was issued
Mhm.
last 4 or 5 years, that's all been used up. So this would be up to the state of Wisconsin to figure out, I suppose, right?
Mhm.
And I can add just a little bit of detail. This came on the heels of Parkland, Florida tragedy. And so a lot of momentum around funding school safety. And so we certainly have benefited from that. We received over $1.5 million in grants over 2 years to increase security at our school, security cameras, a lot of different pieces around hardening the school. And so, you know, for a district with a lot of old buildings, that was very helpful for us to be able to improve our security and our safety for our students. So this was well-spent dollars, but there's positions that went with it that were going to go away. The Speak Up, Speak Out would go away. And so we'd have to figure out how would we fund that because it's something we would want to keep. We had the Stop It app prior to getting the free resource, which was the Speak Up, Speak Out. So anyway, we would support this, no question about it, from a school safety standpoint.
Right, the 8th resolution is with respect to artificial intelligence. And so the statement is that WASB recognizes the significance of AI or artificial intelligence as a newly developing technology and looks to be a part of the state discussion as artificial intelligence evolves. And so this just recognizes that prior to any potential legislation occurring in the future regarding any type of regulation with AI, WASB is indicating in this resolution that it would like to be part of a conversation, recognizing again the potential positive impacts that AI may have both on society as well as education. As you may recall, one of our charter schools was recently featured as an example of how to use this as a learning and instructional opportunity for our students. And so we would certainly recommend this particular resolution and support it.
You will support it as board.
Okay, resolution 24-9, classroom technology has several subparts. So Ebony and I are going to tag team on this one. The general policy 3.30, the administration would recommend the board support the continued use of educational technologies for the use of online learning. This particular resolution doesn't impact our district as much as it does the smaller and the rural districts of the state that rely more heavily on the use of technology to offer classes that they are not able to have an actual class at their schools. This does, however, cover our e-schools. And then 3.31, the state funding. Again, as you just talked about, anytime there are education initiatives, we would encourage the board to support resolutions to include state funding for those initiatives. Because once they become mandates and there's no funding backing them, that becomes difficult. This resolution, or this section of the resolution specifically discusses support for the technology initiatives.
And as Holly mentioned, this section here has several subsets. But overall, in the rationale, there was nothing new added or changed, just some language in terms of the educational technology piece coming from classroom technology. So the subsets that I'm going to speak on are 3.32 virtual charter schools. And as we mentioned before, we do have eSchool. We also have WCA. And so the idea is that they continue to follow state accountability standards and transparency requirements. And we know that when we renew charter contracts, that is something that we take a look at to ensure that they are stating that they will follow those accountability laws and rules. So we're asking that you continue to support that. 3.33 CISAs and virtual charter schools. What this is asking, and again, this is no new language, just asking to continue to support the fact that if a CISA wanted to start a charter school, that they would have to work in conjunction with a local education agency or a school district in order to do so, and asking that we continue to do that.
This one.
Yep, and getting to that, okay, that's okay, and the fact that that they oppose any legislation that will grant them the authority to not engage in that contract. So we want to oppose against that. That part will be key. However, if it were approved, say for instance, that it was approved, there's a statement in here that talks about limiting per pupil payments to the CISA virtual authorized virtual charters to an amount identical to per pupil amount of the open enrollment transfer payment. It basically ensures that there's no unfair competition with the local education agency. That's a lot, so I just wanna, I just wanna pause there because that piece is a lot.
Are there currently any CISA virtual charters?
I'm not certain. I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think they're all schools.
They're all schools. I actually just checked earlier. They are all schools in districts. However, students can enroll in Wisconsin Connections Academy out of any district, but I have not noticed that any CISAs are chartering virtual schools in our state.
Just wondering if there was some concern why this was brought up, if it's in the legislature right now that CISAs can operate schools or start schools or.
I actually just checked the statute before we came and I didn't see anything in there, so I think we're good to go for now anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had similar questions. It does sound like this last part specifically, like it could have been responding to a specific incident, but generally, I agree with the administration on this one. And there are other questions.
It might be interesting discussion at the convention. You might, because often the CISAs seem to be more helpful for some of the smaller, or more rural schools. But I don't know. Okay, but yeah.
Would it be a bit odd, Kay, for CISA to be competing with us? They're really supposed to be supporting us, right?
Well, so I was kind of looking to the back row there. If someone wanted to speak to that. I mean, I don't know.
Nick, I think you have some homework to do when you get there next week to maybe just hear some discussion.
The only thing that I'll mention is this past year, there were 980 bills that came across the desk of our legislators. Now, less than 100 actually make it to a hearing or discussed in any way. So there is a possibility that this statement about CISA's chartering virtual charter or authorizing virtual charter schools may have been in one of those 980 bills, just didn't get any movement. So, but it doesn't mean that it won't come up again. That often does happen. So something to, we can learn more about. To Board Member Ruffalo's question, CISA 6 is our agency that we work with, and we use them for a variety of reasons. Again, as a larger district, we don't have quite as many needs as a smaller district does, just because of all the people you see in the room here. A small district wouldn't have those resources. So small districts do rely on their CISA often to provide leadership, professional development, even some administrative work.
But just to clarify, I mean, currently the law does restrict who can open up charter schools.
Yes,
Okay.
there is a statute for that, that outlines step by step on how that has to work and authorized with a local education agency.
And I don't know, it may be the CISAs are not on that list or I mean, whatever, but that's
I'm
we
only
don't know.
familiar with K-12 districts and then also higher education. So like UW Milwaukee has chartered some schools in Milwaukee area. I'm not sure, maybe UW Madison has as well, I
They
believe.
used
So,
to, not anymore.
okay, so generally it's K-12 districts and then higher ed.
Are we good on this one to support?
I'll leave you.
Okay, 2410 revenue limits. This is not a new resolution. I think you will see this until someday that if they ever actually do something about it, but we will keep asking. Administration would encourage the board to support the statement WASB is opposed to state imposed revenue limits on school districts. And we will say that again and again and again until somebody starts listening. Sorry, I get on my soapbox. The part A of that additional revenue limitations, it just goes into, there's a few little carve outs that they have additional limits on, like if you don't pass a referendum, an operating referendum, then your revenue limit is frozen at that level, regardless of what it actually does. So that really impacted a handful of districts this last year when it jumped from, when the ceiling jumped from 10 to 11,000. And some of those folks were locked in because of some of these additional revenue limitation rules. Can significantly impact some districts. So we remain opposed to that. And then 2.4.1 goes into a little bit more detail that, so if we can't eliminate the revenue limit altogether, we would encourage the board to support the exemptions that are listed in A through F there. Again, this is not new. Increasing the per pupil revenue limit that it is again tied to the CPI like it was when this was first approved, allowing carryover of unused revenue limit authority. C and F both speak to allowability for some flexibility or options in how the membership calculation is done. That in place of the current 3-year rolling average. Calculating summer school attendance at 100% of FTE versus the formula that they use now. And lastly, change the date of when the revenue limits are determined to prior to July 1, before the beginning of the school year. It is currently determined on October 15th, which is 3.5 months into our current year. Makes budgeting, as you all know, difficult.
My only comment, and maybe this is an opportunity. You can reflect on this. This is all great. It's just never gonna happen. At least it seems, I'm very doubtful that much of this can happen right away. But if we look at fully funding special education from 33% to 90 or 100%, well, that was $22 million for us last year. If we look at more funding for EL programs, well, that was $14 million for us last year. So are those maybe more achievable? Is that something else that WASB could look at? I think it's great to set that high standard and kind of keep asking for it, but can we also have some things that maybe are more practical or more, that's the right word for it, might be more attainable to us in the next budget cycle. The other thing that, and I've heard many legislators talk about this, is districts like Appleton that are kind of moving from suburban to urban, and we're landlocked and we have a flat enrollment, and where our land value is such, equalized value is stable. We really get hurt by the current funding formula. And there are those that have talked about maybe we need to revise that portion of it. they're always a little bit stuck because it kind of sounds like you're taking money from one district and give it to the other, and that's difficult. But I think some of those things might be worth a discussion because they just may be more attainable to us in the near term. But just some thoughts.
I appreciate that, Ed, and this will be my first time attending the convention, so I don't know like how it's all gonna go. But as I was preparing and reviewing these, I mean, it's very clear that this is like about advocacy, and so, that's why I wasn't immediately thinking about all of those things, Ed. I was more so thinking, yeah, absolutely, we want to support this, but, yeah.
But these are the resolutions that have survived the process. WASB asking all the 400 and some districts in the state, send your proposals, we could do that. And then there's a smaller group of, I don't know, 15 or something representatives at the school board representatives from across the state that then look at all these proposals and then try to come up with, let's narrow the list and try to focus. You don't have 400 different requests out there, right? What are the commonalities that large and small districts can come together around? So, I mean, what Ed is saying is absolutely true, and that's, but I don't know you're going to get a chance to speak to that at the convention, because I think you're going to be trying to
I
respond
could
to
ask Ed
these.
to write me a paragraph.
Well, or we can submit a resolution next year. That's what we should do.
All right, so we will support this.
All right, then I'm going to take us through the next section, which all is about licensing and programs. I'm joined with Laura Jackson as Student Services. Some of the questions are in regards to social workers and such. So going through the policy or the resolutions, absolutely, we would support these as general, and I'll kind of walk through each of them. So the first one, the 4.6, the general policy, that's always our goal. Highly educated, highly trained. They do have in there reasonable flexibility, which is an interesting term to meet the needs of our members. But we would support that as it's critical. Should I stop after each one? These are all kind of tied together.
I think this is
This is one separate.
Just, I appreciated that they added in there, or that have highly educated, highly trained, effective. I guess I wonder how that is being evaluated. What that actually means.
Is that in the evaluation section? I think the next section is evaluation, possibly.
I guess I just want to make sure that any changes that we make are truly changes that will, the people who end up in the teaching field are going to feel that they have the background that they need in order to be effective teachers. And that just because we have a shortage, we don't want to go down a path of changing criteria to increase the number of candidates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll specifically touch on that in one section. So I'll address that again, Chris. So was there questions or a thumbs? Are you taking a vote on that first one? Okay.
My thought on this
4.6.
section is that, like, if there are questions as we go, but since they're all so interconnected, like
I'll go through all the licensure ones and then we'll transition to evaluation separate. Okay, all right. So the second one, which is the 4.61 shortage, the teacher shortage pathways, we would support that. Those have been successful in partnerships through like CISA 6 Right program, things of that nature. And to that point, those are programs that are successful because they have the support along with the training and the experience. Likewise, B, the technical education shortage. This is one of our most challenging areas to fill. We would support that one as well, hoping for additional partnerships with some of our technical partners, Fox Valley Tech and others. So absolutely. The third one
is about school social worker certification and licensure. Currently in the state, we have limited universities that provide the licensure for school social worker. In addition to that, the parameters around obtaining that license create some obstacles, really even stronger obstacles for our rural school districts in order to obtain licensed school social workers, excuse me. So this focuses on helping to address those obstacles for licensure. Would also provide opportunities for folks who have a master's degree in social work, but not a school certification to obtain that in a succinct manner and open up those folks for more experience in schools and making that transition to school social work.
Moving on to 4.62, so temporary certification. This has had many names in the past, emergency regulations. We would support this. Currently, we do have teachers that work particularly outside of their content area and are licensed teachers, so there's two different kinds. So we would support that. That is something that we do utilize and use our mentor support, or if they're experienced educators, they have classroom management and those skills and can teach in another area. So that one we would support. The other one has been a long time wish list, which is the mentorship and residency model. So many states are moving to that model, Tennessee, Texas, and others. We are actively pursuing this in the state of Wisconsin with the Department of Workforce Development and Higher Ed partners. These types of models can really eliminate that first year experience for educators because they have that support for a full year. And some of the states that have adopted that are seeing 80% retention of their first 5 years of teaching, which is phenomenal. So we absolutely would support that one. The DPI licensing clinical counselors.
So currently, a clinical counselor coming into the schools would not be able to be a school counselor. And this resolution is about the department allowing those with a clinical counseling license to become school counselors and remove some barriers for that. That would allow them to provide direct service to students within the school as a member of the school district staff.
Okay. And then 4.65 teacher competency exams. So this has been utilized with the FORT as an example for an alternative option, a portfolio option for special education. And it's just expanding it to allow that separate alternative option for that testing for other licensure areas, which we would support. Charter school teachers, currently they do pass praxis tests if they're not licensed within that area. This is particularly helpful to us in those schools that have project-based schools that might be teaching cross curriculum. So we would support the charter school resolution. And then the 4.69 safety of students, that has been in place, and we would continue to support that one as it protects our students. Bless you. And then I think, yep, that one is going to be coming up by me for the next section. So those are the licensed ones before we go through the evaluation.
And I do have a question
Yeah.
about 4.63.
Yes.
Can you just like give me like an example? Like I'm thinking. Yeah, can you give me an example of like what this alternative, like what a mentorship residency, what that would look like? So like, is it like a paraprofessional?
Yep, so it looks a little bit different in different states. Talked about funding before, and one of the important pieces is a state has to have an approved apprenticeship residency program. They use them different titles in order to access federal funds for those programs. So that's critical that our state has something like that. What it would look like or could is you might have, I'll use a paraprofessional as that's been an example that we've used in the past. They may go through their education for the first year and second year. We do have to have a compensation structure in place for them as they work through that. And then the third year, they would go into an internship as an example. What that means is they'd be working a full year alongside another teacher. They would be able to teach, but they're not on their own. It's basically a team teaching type structure. They are compensated during that time. Most models are in between a teacher and a para compensation, but the whole idea is taking away that barrier, allowing more people to enter the field, and also that support. So we think about having somebody alongside another teacher for a full year, and all those experiences that they can have. Obviously, the funding is a big part of it, but this would allow us access to those federal funds to apply.
So for example, like the paraprofessional wouldn't have to do a year of student teaching through a university to get a license under this.
Yes, so it's a partnership between the school district, a higher ed, university or technical college, and the Department of Workforce Development. And then DPI would provide the licensure, so they're also a partner there. Yeah, so it takes the place, that year-long internship would take the place of student teaching.
That's helpful, thank you. Do we want to say yes or no on all these before we go to evaluation?
It's all one resolution.
No, they're all separate.
They're all separate.
Just a quick question for you, Julie, with the funding federally. Does it fund the model likely at 100 or close to 100% of cost, or would it be a much smaller percentage? Do you?
It depends. Many of them will fund the education portion. Some districts, fortunate districts that have like an endowment fund or something like that will have that, or a state funding. There were some grants from DWD a couple years back that offered that opportunity. It most likely would not fund a differential in pay. What many districts do is they may not have as many paraprofessionals. That person is an extra set of hands, but their main assignment is to that teacher in that classroom. So they can still help and do some of the duties as a paraprofessional, lunchroom supervision or things like that. But their primary is additional assistance in that classroom and learning the job.
Gotcha. So, but it sounds like we're leaving some money on the table that we could access federally by not having this regardless.
Yes.
That just seems like a compelling reason in some ways that you might want to move forward with it, but maybe I'm missing something.
No, I absolutely want to move forward with it. If I did not convey that, I am now.
Oh, no. I mean, no. I got that message from you. I just meant maybe there is something from a counter perspective,
Yeah.
someone at the convention might bring up why they don't like it, but
Yeah.
it seems like if there's money on the table to fund it,
There
that
was
would be
not-
compelling.
Yeah.
To get behind it
There was
regardless.
not a federal recognized apprenticeship program for educators until I want to say 2020.
Hmm.
So that's
Okay.
fairly recent at the federal level.
Got it. Okay.
To Jason's question, as I'm looking at it, I think it is all one resolution. Like these changes to each resolution are packaged as one resolution.
That's fine.
Yeah. So if there's any deviation coming up, other than support, we'll probably have to about that.
Really just for clarification, is I'm looking at 4.65, the teacher competency exam. Is there not a competency exam in place currently?
Well, there's technically two. There's Praxis 1, Praxis 2, and then there's the FORTs, the foundations and reading. So there's technically 3. The FORT has traditionally been the one that has been the most challenging because it does test students on things that they might not have necessarily learned in their program. So as an example, we might have a teacher who's a 1-8 certified teacher that hasn't had the pre-K or the early literacy part of their program. So there has been a traditional disconnect and a challenge, or special education as example, their focus has been a little bit different through their program. So the foundations in reading has traditionally been a challenging test.
So this would allow more flexibility then, individual being able to show their competency. Thank you.
Right now it's a portfolio.
All right, I think we have to go through evaluations now.
Yeah, so with respect to 4.80 evaluations, again, it's not new language, it's just updating language that was previously in place. Ensuring that we support school districts' efforts to have an evaluation process that's both systematic and continuous. And really, this is broken up into 3 discrete areas. The first piece being letter A, talking about staff improvement and professional development. So WASB would support the efforts of school boards to ensure that staff do have continuous and ongoing professional development that is responsive to staff needs and what our student data shows we need to be focusing on in terms of perhaps needed coaching or mentoring. The second component, letter B, for evaluations would be supporting legislation that would continue to allow districts to have an evaluation tool that would include student assessment results data. However, it's important to point out that this is contingent on it not being mandated. So in other words, it's an opportunity districts could pursue if they so choose, but one that would not be universally mandated for all districts. If a district were to choose to do this, it would do so gradually and also allow districts the opportunity to pilot their own rigorous system. So within the Appleton Area School District, we using the Danielson framework as part of our educator effectiveness model. We do have what are called SLOs or student learning objectives in which staff members do identify a particular area of growth that they wish to see in their students, which is based on normally classroom assessment data for many of our staff. But again, this is important to identify that it's not something that would be mandated, and it would still allow districts to have implementation of their own rigorous systems. And then finally, the third part is just indicating that WASB would support efforts to ensure that there are key guiding principles for any type of educator effectiveness system, that there would be model performance-based evaluation systems for both teachers and administrators, and that there would be a framework for implementation. So again, very similar to what we already have in place. It's just updated language. But the fourth part I think is really important is making sure that there is also a continuous process for making recommendations for improvement within those frameworks. So 3 discrete parts that all fall under evaluations. Again, it's more about updated language than any new resolution there.
You know, my read on this suite of revisions is that trying to it's trying to capture the desire for flexibility and local control for school districts. Like that seems like a through line through these revisions. All right. Thank you, everyone.
There is one more.
Oh.
That came through later. Came out of Milwaukee Public Schools. And so Steve is going to speak to that one. Is resolution 2324R -004.
Right, thank you, Superintendent Hargis. So this resolution, Nick, is one that you are likely to see as part of the other resolutions. This just did not make the September deadline for which other delegates would have submitted a resolution. But as Greg indicated, this does come through the Milwaukee Public School System. And as many of you are very well aware, with the recent passing of Act 20, with the start of the 24-25 school year, we will have required statewide literacy screeners, reading readiness screeners for students in grades both in 4K as well as 5K through grade. And what has been our past practices universally throughout the state of Wisconsin is that any student who is identified as an EL or English learning student takes any of those required assessments in English. And what this particular resolution is indicating is that that practice is being identified as being in violation of federal law. That actually case law, which would be Lau versus Nichols from 1973, indicates that this violates federal law, and that it's really going against the equity in language instruction and by extension assessment by having that practice. And that we very likely have students who are identified as EL who are fluent and able to read and write in their home language, but not yet be English proficient. And so by having students take that screener in English and not in their home language, they would potentially be identified at risk, as the language is used here, for not to being able to read or write when actually they very well can quite well in their home language. And so it is advocating for ensuring that we would be following identified best practices, which is something Amy Swick and I shared with you previously with our multilingual policy, which is also part of tonight's agenda. And by following those best practices, ensuring that our EL students who would be participating in that required reading readiness screener would do so through their home language if they're identified as an EL student and not mandated to do that in English. And so this is certainly something that we would be supporting, but it is, as Greg indicated, this is separate from the other resolutions that were previously submitted.
So Steve, is the concern that I didn't see anything in Act 20 that said the assessments had to be done in English? So are they kind of combining together Act 20 plus current practices with DPIs?
Yeah, right now, that is actually a part of Act 20 that it is in English. And so that is a point of contention right now, and one that I would anticipate we will also see played out in the courts as well. Correct. Would support this.
Burden on the district to acquire the screener?
Like many resolutions, there's not always financial support for them. However, because this would be is a state mandated assessment that is yet to be determined, so that's part of the timeline yet of what will that screener look like. Certainly, we're one of many districts that has a large number of different languages spoken, and so that is something that would have to be universally supplied for districts. But to your point, one that's not intentionally identified right now is being financially supported.
This just seems like one that is having unique. This seems like one that would have a unique effect on our district specifically versus maybe some other districts. A lot of these ones that we've talked about are probably not that impactful on our district. So I'm just curious about the specific impact on our district.
Yeah, I agree, Jason, and as the rationales provided here, why it makes sense, this was also coming through MPS, is that MPS alone has over 9,000 ELs, and certainly Appleton Area School District, Madison Metropolitan, among others, would definitely be impacted by this.
For me, that's an easy thumbs up. I don't.
Thank you for everyone that helped describe these resolutions more and provide more background information. Nick, do you think you have enough what you need? Any other?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to representing all of our voices next week, 2 weeks.
Well, hopefully it'll come to completion, or talk to Peng about what happens if it doesn't, right? No, thank you for serving in that role for us. It's important and we do appreciate you being willing to do that. So thank you. We are back to board business. OE5 financial planning policy. This is a short revision that had been discussed at a previous meeting and basically was changing. I'm trying to find out.
Right, there's just 3 updates to the language on the financial planning OE5. So the first statement would read, the superintendent shall develop and maintain multi-year financial plan that is related directly to the board's results, priorities, and operational expectations, and that avoids long-term fiscal risk to the district. So just simply change 3 words in that operational expectation.
I know we have discussed this previously. Everyone see where we are? Then with those revisions, I'd ask for a motion to approve the revisions to OE5.
Move to approve revisions to OE5.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion?
Can I just ask a quick question as a reminder? The part that's changed from present to board, changing that to maintain. Can you just remind me the rationale for that change? I am not recalling the specifics, though I remember it. We had some of that conversation. I just wanted.
So Holly, you want to join us? So where it reads, the superintendent shall develop and maintain, our struggle was with the kind of vague language of presenting to the board. And so within other policy, within other operational expectations, it's more specific about what we present and when we present it, as opposed to just saying we shall develop and present to the board the multi-year financial plan.
Got it. Okay, that jogs my memory. It's captured somewhat elsewhere, more specifically. And I feel like there was maybe part of a conversation that was like we have access to ask the questions whenever we need the information as well. And it happens naturally in different ways too. So that was the rationale. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, roll call please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, then we have monitoring report OE6. And again, this was presented, I think, December 11th.
Work session on the 20th.
Okay. Work session on December 20th. We had looked at the OE6, and at that time, I believe, the board was in agreement with accepting OE6 as presented. So with that, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right. Any other questions, discussion? Nope. Okay, then roll call, please, Kayla.
Aye.
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 Okay, then monitoring report OE12 facilities, that also was, we had that presented at the December 20th work session. And is there a motion to accept the report as submitted, which was compliant with the exceptions noted?
Move to accept report on OE12 facilities.
Second.
Any further questions, discussion? Okay, then roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, then next is policy 342.7, services for multilingual learners. This was presented and discussed at the December 11th meeting. Dr. Harrison is here for any additional questions if we need that. Otherwise, there is a motion to approve the changes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Then roll call, please. Aye.
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 Okay, and then next, policy 522.1, alcohol and drug-free workplace. This was another policy that had been identified that we needed some work on. And this one actually then replaces a former policy. Again, this, I think we've talked about this even twice, the last time at the December 11th board meeting. So would there be motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Is that Nick? Is that you? Thank you. Thanks. Okay, any other questions on this or just discussion? Then roll call, please. Kim.
Aye.
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 Okay. Then we have the check register from December of 23. This was included in the packet. Holly had already presented this to us, and we had a chance to ask questions at that time. But we have this under board business. Is there a motion? Ed, do you want to say something?
Yes, I'll be abstaining from this vote as this represents a potential conflict of interest. Thank you.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the check registry from December of 23?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, then. Is it too fast? Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then the 2024-2025 educator calendar, Mr. Hutchins.
So this is not an action item. It is an update to a discussion we held on our December 11th meeting, where we discussed the educator calendar for next year. And due to concerns that remain with holding an in-person PD day, which would be in the third week of August, August 21st, the executive team is planning to move forward with a flexible schedule or a flexible structure that would allow educators to accumulate 7 hours of professional development time over a period of time. We talked this morning again about, should we say a semester or a whole year? Knowing that we kind of want to front load some of the PD for next year, but we'll essentially use the same or very similar structure to what we did in the past years when we had 40 hours of PD time that educators had to document each year. So it'll be the 7 hours. We also had a question that came up about, are we going to run into this challenge in future calendars? So we put together draft calendars through the 27-28 school year. And the answer to that question is maybe. Each calendar is a little bit different with where the holidays land. So 2 years from now, Labor Day is on the 1st of September. And then the year after that, it's on the 7th of September. And so that causes us obviously to have to look at the calendar, make some changes that impact every calendar. So ultimately what we want to do is continue to use survey data that we collected from educators in 2022, which told us that priorities are the 23rd of December being off if possible, then the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then also the Friday before spring break week. And now after the discussions we've had this fall around trying to maintain that 11 weeks of vacation during the summer is important. So we'll again put all of those together, work with the calendar work group each year going forward to do the best that we can with a calendar, knowing that we stay kind of within those priorities. In some years, we'll be able to do all 4 of those. Other years, we won't be able to, just simply because we have to fit between the state mandated September 1st start date and what we know parents and staff want, which is to be finished with our school year the first full week of June, if possible. So anyway, we'll put all that together, but just wanted to make sure you knew that we are looking at a flexible 7 hours of PD. You know, like we talked about at the last meeting, we've got a lot of really important work in terms of elementary literacy, transitioning 6th grade. You heard tonight during the work session about all the curriculum changes in 6th and 7th grade. So a lot of important work that will get done during professional development. So any questions?
Well, okay. First, let's say thanks for taking the feedback that we all heard and acting on it. And I appreciate that personally, and I'm sure there are a lot of people listening that do as well. I just had a question though about the September 1st mandate, because we can apply for like permission. I don't know what the right language is, but permission to start earlier, if that does make sense. Can you speak a little bit to like what that would look like and why we would potentially choose to do that, or what are the criteria with which to do that? Because I know a few districts in the state do that occasionally, and I don't know for sure their rationale, but I would imagine part of it might be balancing all that we have to balance and putting a calendar together, and there's just exceptions that come sometimes. So
Sure.
Speaking to that would be helpful.
I can. And so, you know, every district is a little bit different with where their priorities are. A lot of districts like to have more time off during the school year, and then their school year ends deeper into June. And as a district, like I said, we've surveyed staff and families. It was heavy for families. I think the number was close to 70% were opposed to going deeper into June. Whereas staff were like 51% to 49%, so about even. Another piece that's been coming up every year is legislation that would give flexibility to districts. And so there is a bill again this legislative session that will be considered that would allow districts to start before September 1st, but they would have to have the Friday off before Labor Day. So again, it would give us some flexibility. And that was kind of a compromise with the travel industry in Wisconsin, which is really opposed because they need employees, right? They need kids to be working through Labor Day. So we'll look at that, but I think something for us to consider is really, when will we have more heat? I mean, it could come down to, it doesn't make more sense to us to be in school in June when it maybe is a little bit cooler than the last week in August. So, but we've been waiting probably each of the last couple of years. This bill has come up and it hasn't gotten enough traction to be brought for a vote. So we've been told that this year it might happen. So anyway, that would give us another kind of week of flexibility.
Got it. But just to clarify too, under the current legislation, there is still like exceptions that you can apply for.
Right.
To say when you need to.
Right.
What are the criteria with which those are approved or taken or considered, I guess? Do you know?
I don't know exactly because we haven't looked into it. What I have been told is that districts that apply for this waiver have been granted the waiver. So that's as much as we know. We just haven't pursued it.
Then that makes sense. And especially since it sounds like we're starting to look more forward thinking year over year. I just thought I'd bring that up as something to be mindful of in case it were ever advantageous. You know, because I think part of what it felt like too was shifting from like a longer summer to then like a really contracted summer back to back also just feels harder sometimes. So if we could have that multi-year impact to smooth it out, sometimes maybe starting a few days might matter. So I just thought I'd bring it up. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That is always the most challenging part of our calendar is the 2 weeks, the last week in August, first week of September, and where does Labor Day fall and where does the 1st of September fall? Yeah.
My question is kind of around the philosophy for the district on professional development more generally. I wasn't on the board when the decision was made to move away from the kind of the 40-hour self-directed professional development. My suspicion is that whether it's 7 hours or 40 hours or 100 hours, the number of hours is not the significant issue with trying to manage the self-directed development. I could be wrong in that assumption. Correct me if that's the case. And I think the district has there's reason for the district to want to guide professional development and make sure that, you know, all the educators are receiving the same quality and type of training. But I can also understand that would be a desire from an individual's perspective to professionally develop on things that are interesting to that individual or are relevant to their specific position. And I'm wondering if there's maybe room or you know, thoughts around the idea of doing some type of hybrid between where we currently are and where we were in the past that would maybe scratch both of those itches a little bit.
So prior to about maybe 10, 12 years ago, when we went to the 40-point system, the 40 hours, prior to that, there was 12 hours. And so with 12 hours, there was a lot of flexibility for staff. And, you know, if you were a football coach, you could get your 12 hours by going to the state football convention. And when it came out of Act 10, this requirement to have something tied to evaluation, movement on the pay structure, and some districts went with you know, pay for performance essentially, like we read a little bit in a resolution based on test scores of students. And our district didn't want to go in that direction, but we wanted to recognize the need for continuous improvement from our staff. And so spent a lot of time over maybe a year and a half. I'm looking at Julie King as she was in her role at the time. And it was a large work group that came together and ultimately came up with the 40 points equivalent to 1 week of work, 1 week of professional development with flexibility within some certain areas. It had to be collaborative, meaning you couldn't by yourself go somewhere for professional development. You have to come back and you have to share it with colleagues as part of a PLC. And there's some other parameters in there. And then over the years, there just was a lot of discussion. I guess a lot of educators were unhappy with the 40 points, the 40 hours. for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's hard to find 40 quality hours depending on what your role is in the district. And then another role, you know, it maybe has 100 hours to choose from. So there were just some struggles there. And ultimately, the decision was made, and it really was based on educators' preference, to go with a more structured approach, to have the district lead it, not do recording, not do the flexible, because there's an element of, it's more work for educators, because now they have to put this together. They have to come up with, and that was a struggle, is trying to come up with 40 hours sometimes was a challenge. And we offered a lot of different PD throughout the summer, throughout the school year. But it really was, it was a challenge for our AC&I department. They had to oversee it. It just was a lot of time and energy put into something that we felt as a district, both on the educator side and the administrative side, that maybe it wasn't leading to the most successful improvement. And so we went with this. We didn't go 40 hours. We went with the equivalent of 21 hours or so, 3 days, and built those into the calendar. Now, we already had the 11 other days that were either conference compensation, professional development, or some training days that we have. And so added the 3 days, posed a little bit of a, that's why we're facing this now with the calendar, because now we have 14 days outside of the school calendar that we have to schedule. This is our first year of this model, full day professional developments. We sent out a survey today to find out, we have 3 of them in during the school year, and then the 5 days that we had before the school year started, to get some feedback on how successful they have been. But it really is, it's a constant struggle for us to, we use the phrase sometimes, freedom within fences. We want to give freedom and flexibility to staff to look for their own professional development, improve in areas that they feel they need to improve. But then also we have areas as a district that we need to move all educators forward. And so something like literacy, we feel like we have to have some control over ensuring that every K-5 educator has the most up-to-date method for teaching, the best practice in teaching literacy. At middle level, we have the transition for 6th and 7th grade. And then there lies another challenge, is we have 8th grade teachers who aren't necessarily impacted by 6th and 7th. So we look to find professional development that's going to be meaningful for them as well. In the past, we've had a work group that's come around. It's been educators, administrators, both district and at the building, to come together to plan professional development. We've talked about bringing that back together after this year or later in this year. Really do want to try to be flexible in that, what do educators need to try to improve continuously? And then what do we need as a district to move everybody forward? You know, at the high school, it's always a challenge, because you might have somebody, you know, an art teacher has very different needs than perhaps a math teacher. And that's always a challenge at the high school. So anyway, we do try to give some options. We do balance between district-led and school-led. And then we have to hope that we don't have too many different initiatives coming from the school and district, that we kind of lose our focus and overwhelm educators a little bit. So I don't know if I've answered your question. Certainly I haven't succinctly, but a lot of time and energy goes into professional development.
Sure, and I understand, and obviously the importance of that is obvious. I'm just wondering, because it seems like there was a lot of support around this idea of these 7 hours being more personal to the educators. So I guess that's where I was kind of thinking about some sort of hybrid approach, kind of on an ongoing basis.
And I think that we certainly can see where we are with the 7 hours and see how that goes this year. Last year, we did this as well. And I would say administratively, we didn't think it was that successful. We didn't think the outcomes necessarily were a trade-off for the amount of time and energy it takes. for educators to document their 7 hours or whatever it is. And then for administrators to validate that or to verify that, I guess I should say. But certainly if we have more time this year to think about it, last year it came up late. It came up with just 3 months to go in the school year because we had a PD day planned for the Monday after the school year ended. So it was brought to us by educators saying, we don't love this idea. We don't know if we're going to have any data already to look at. I mean, that's really the key at the end of the year is you want to see how successful were we. And so that Monday right after the school year ended, we weren't going to have all the data to look at. So we did that within 3 months, quickly rolled it out. And it was a lot of time and energy. But maybe this year we've got a little more time to think about it and see if it's something we want to do. We're certainly going to check with the principals, our school administrators, see if they find value in this, see if our educators want to do this. And again, we don't know. We'll survey again. We had a high percentage that liked the August 21st day as compared to the 3 other options. But we'll see if educators like having to come up with their own PD essentially. Certainly, we do plan to offer quite a bit of PD opportunities in August before the school year starts. And so we'll do that both in conjunction with building principals and ACI department.
Great, thank you.
I just want to say thank you too for the flexibility that's being offered, because I do believe that it's really important for everyone to get the same background information. But I think, you know, no 2 educators are possibly in the same place on things. So it does allow for some additional, maybe like personal development that I think that 7 hours will be used carefully and hopefully will be beneficial to individuals. Thank you for that.
Okay, to the end of our agenda, future meetings coming up. Couple. yeah,
Something
go ahead.
real quick.
Sure.
There was a community linkages of tomorrow. The citywide PTA has contacted me already and said they're canceling. So there's no need to try to go tomorrow evening. And just a reminder that there's one on the 23rd, but tomorrow is canceled. We will reschedule.
Okay, thank you for that, and we'll get that information out to folks, so. Okay, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, any opposed? All right, thank you and have a good night. And get your shovels warmed up.